the AI in Business podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the AI in Business podcast. I'm here today with Dr. Nikolas Webster. He did his undergrad and graduate degree both at Indiana University and then went to Florida State to do his PhD in philosophy and sports management. Hi, Dr. Webster. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing okay. So let's just launch into the questions. So my first question for you is, what are the most promising applications of AI in sports today?
Great question. There's a couple different things that come to mind because obviously this is a overall hot topic, right? And so whether you're sports or not, right? People are trying to figure out, first, what is AI? How it can help with, personal endeavors, with business endeavors, right? And trying to figure out how does the technology fit with what people are trying to do, right? But when we talk about sports specifically, the main thing that pops to my mind is definitely in the analytics side. Right, and player analytics and scouting. And when you think about it, whether you look at, the college sport level, here in the U.S., whether you look at just soccer globally, you have different organizations who are, always trying to grow their analytics department, right? And they're always trying to figure out how do you create a new edge, for your team. So I know I follow Liverpool in the EPL a little bit. But they were one of the, and they're not the only team, they're not the only club, but they're one of the kind of earlier adopters of analytics in general. And I know that, they've incorporated AI more into their scouting, right? Think about just from a pure man or woman power perspective, right? You could either have a group of people who are sitting there trying to churn through tape, data sets, right? Or you can train an AI to do that for you, right? And to help you be more efficient in that regard and uncover new talent quicker, right? So that's kind of the main space, I guess, the first space rather where, we kind of see application of AI is definitely when it comes to player analytics, scouting players, recruiting players, right? And that's in all of sports. I just mentioned soccer, but it's not just soccer. That's kind of that 1A. The other part, and I'm a marketing person, I'm a marketing nerd, so to speak. The other part of that is, how companies are using AI on that front, right? To learn about consumers, learn about their habits, where their eyeballs, you think about every day, if you're scrolling on social media or you're going to different websites, consumer engagement, learning about consumers, what are their behaviors? And so from a marketing perspective, there's always that effort to understand the why behind consumption, right? And so I think AI has been employed by a lot of different companies. You think of kind of your classic sport companies like, Nike is a classic one, right? And so, you have these large companies that are saying, okay, from a marketing perspective, how can we learn more about consumers? And that will then help us create new product offerings, right? And design, and if we stick with Nike, right? It's new shoes and new apparel and those things. So those are kind of the two big buckets, so to speak, that come to mind, right? Definitely on the marketing front, learning about consumers, but learning about and diving more into rather player analytics and data analysis for, building rosters.
Right. This is a little more sports adjacent, but I know I'm really excited to see when the EA Sports games, for example, start implementing AI. The current broadcasting in the games is frustrating at times where the announcers aren't really reacting the way you'd want them to. And I think it would be awesome. Obviously, an announcer would have to sell the rights to their voice, which gets kind of iffy. But if they did so, then you could have these live in-game moments, reacting in real time based on what happened, and really getting excited. I don't know. I would really want to see them implement that.
I mean, related to that, right? And I think that's a good example. You're always thinking about whether it's, in your case, maybe EA Sports or, whatever company. How do you always think about the fan or the consumer experience? So where you're describing immediately, okay, that could be something that enhances that experience for somebody playing a game, right? To not only have, if we play a game, I'm a big college football guy, right? So if we play the college football game this year, I know they record Kirk Herbstreit and those guys record their voices, but there's only a set snippets rather, right, of what kind of things they can say. But to have something that actually is dynamic, like what you're describing, I think would be a great value add for fans, right, who want to have that, that feedback, so to speak, from the game itself, commentating on the plays that are being made and as the season progresses and those sorts of things. So yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah. For sure. All right, I'm going to move on to our next question. Do you see AI affecting how sports content is produced or broadcast?
Yeah, kind of related to what we just talked about, too. We talked about content.
Right.
quote unquote. And so I think that falls in that bucket, so to speak. I do know a couple of things that come to mind. I know like IBM's Watson, like the supercomputer and the AI computer, they worked with Wimbledon. That was this year or last year, maybe both, to create like in real time digital like advertising for people watching Wimbledon. And that's where I kind of, we are starting to see that aspect from a broadcasting perspective. It's really about the advertising, right? Like, I always talk about, whether it's, the intro class or marketing class I might teach, like the augmented reality of digital ads, right? It's like when you're watching a hockey game, an NHL game, for example, and you see on the ice all these different, advertisers on the ice or like broadcasted like on the glass around, right? And those are changing every, period or every even, 4 minutes or so. And so I think that's a huge space from a broadcasting perspective where AI is playing a role, right? Is understanding, again, go back to what we talked about in the first question is as companies, and in this case, whether it's the NHL or whoever, learn more about who's watching the game, employing AI in a way that's going to, target these ads more effectively. So you could be watching the Red Wings game from your place. I could be watching the Red Wings game from my place, watching the same game live, but yet the AI is going to be able to tell us and show you, hey, here are maybe some ads that more fit your profile versus me versus, whoever. But I don't know if this can actually go two ways. If I can ask that question to you, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. But the thing, advertising is what comes to mind first and foremost for me, because that's something that they're already collecting data on, right, in real time of what, who's the target audience, who's a segment, and then what companies align with said segment. That makes sense.
Yeah, I do have a response to that actually. So I don't know if you've seen how, like, especially for international games, they'll overlay cartoon characters' bodies or like video game characters' bodies over the players. I think it's kind of like they're trying to create that like Sunday morning cartoon feel a little bit, like to get kids interested in watching who don't care about football itself yet.
Yeah.
It's very janky. It's a very strange experience. I know they did it for one of the playoff games last year, and there was this thing that like they supposedly put Harbaugh in a cage, and then like the Chargers lost the game after that or something. Like it's not there yet for sure, but it's a strange experience. But I see how it could be implemented. Like this is like the baby steps getting to like one day seeing something like a cooler evolution of that. I don't know exactly what that would look like right now, but I do think that that's a promising area.
Yeah, and I think kind of related to that, and I don't know, it's been a couple years. I know the NFL has done this, and I don't know if they've transitioned to the AI part of this yet. It's more kind of like an augmented reality. It's like the not Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon partnership they do for an NFL game, right? And so like they put, I don't know, SpongeBob or right, like whoever.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was talking about.
Yeah, if there's a way that now you can say, and I'm just thinking of this in real time right now, like, what if there's a way that, again, depending on who's watching that event, that those cartoons do change, right? So like if you are a fan of, or you remember watching SpongeBob when you were a kid or like whatever, and somebody else, who might be a millennial or Gen X grew up watching like the original Power Rangers on Saturday morning, right? Like I wonder if there's like, or Batman or, whatever, if that's maybe a space that, could be interesting to explore, because you're always, again, take a step back, like from whether it's the NFL we're talking about right now, or, if it's Nickelodeon or whatever the organization or company is, you're always trying to figure out what are those points of connection, right? And so that could be a good way of saying, hey, maybe they do like, football in this case, but whether it's kids watching or a certain demographic or a certain generation, what if we tailored another connection point, so to speak? In this case, we're talking about cartoons. And so some people might see this cartoon versus that cartoon. That's just another layer, another point that maybe they can, connect with that product and watching it in real time. Right. So that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just to continue on, do you think that coaches trust AI insights enough to base strategy on them right now?
I have a gut reaction to that. I would say no. I don't have any evidence of that but if we just think historically, like anytime, there's a new technology introduced, right? Or we think back to, even when just data analysis was kind of introduced into the coaching space, right? Like coaches who are quote unquote old school, right? Like,
Right.
had their ways, right? They were trained by
Right.
whatever coach they followed under, right? And then this is just how you do things, right? This is how you structure practice. This is how you structure your nutrition tables. This is how you do, your rehab and your athletic training and all these things. And even like in-game strategy too, right? Like if it's fourth down, you always punt no matter what. Down distance
Right.
doesn't matter, field doesn't matter. So not only is it like strategy, like in game, which I think is what you're alluding to, but also just like from an organizational decision making and how do you
Right.
structure a program, right? Because that's also strategic. So I think there will always be that lag, so to speak. And some coaches embrace it sooner than others, right? When it comes to just analytics, or in this case, we're talking about AI. But I always think there's going to be kind of that hesitancy, right? Because part of it's just like rate of adoption, right? How can you, if you're a coach, fundamentally you always want to win, right? Or you always want to compete at the highest level. You always want to make sure you're trying to win your conference or the league or like whatever the sport is. And so if that's kind of where your basis is, then you would think logically then they would take any advantage they can get, and maybe that is AI. But I think the step to maybe help that process along is helping coaches or educating coaches on like how it can actually help. You know what I mean? Like it's not just this like AI thing floating in the ether, right? It's like, here's how this tool can actually help you with whether it is an in-game choice, when to substitute, for example, or this guy needs an extra day of rest, or whatever. It's just enhancing, that go back to like the infrastructure that some clubs have already put in or some teams have already put in with data analysis, right? And how do we actually optimize our choices we're being made? So I think over time we'll get there. And, for the most part, I like to think that when we talk about, the big leagues in the US, we talk about soccer in Europe, when you talk about college sports, like for the most part, people have hopped on data analysis, right? And like that's a piece to the puzzle. I think in a similar way, we'll get there with, okay, here's how AI can help us with whether it is in-game decisions or just building a program.
Yeah, for sure. And another thing with sports is it tends to be pretty traditional, and they tend to be slower to adopt things, especially compared to the tech industry or like other industries that tend to be a little bit quicker to pick up on things. There's a lot of people like the way that things happen in sports. You do see. Sure. I don't know if you remember Brandon Staley with the Chargers, his little stint over there, and his kind of like go for it on fourth down no matter where you are on the field. But that received a lot of backlash. People really did not like that. And I think that was a little pre like the Gen AI era, but it was still like people were very frustrated with him for doing that.
And related to, we see this all the time with like when new products are launched, like sometimes it's too soon. Right? Like it's, there's some, like I remember, and I can't remember the exact year, but like the smart glasses, right? Like having cameras in your glasses, like Google Lens and those things, like that technology has been around for a minute, but it never really took off. Right. And so sometimes you have products that are just, too early for what's, going on in the larger landscape. Right. And obviously now we're seeing, more coaches in your example go for on fourth down and, trying to educate like, why is this the right choice and those things. That's another thing too, is how something enters the marketplace, so to speak. Timing does matter, right? And what's kind of the norm versus where, the thing is going.
Yeah, for sure. And then I'm going to hit you with one last question here. Do you think that AI could eventually replace roles in coaching, officiating, or management?
Fully replace? I would probably make the argument no, but very much help and augment, I think so, right? And I think it depends too, like if we're talking about a certain sport, right, or a certain organization. I know that, for example, like, the Major League Baseball has been playing around with the robot umps, right, for a while. It was this last year they tested it all out in the minor leagues, maybe it was 2 years ago. And so I think in some cases it could be helpful, but to replace like a head coach or a CEO, I think that's incredibly difficult to do, because one thing AI cannot do, right, is replace that human element, right? And like when you talk about when you're in a position like that, a decision-making role, like a coach or a manager or a CEO, building relationships is part of that, right? It's probably the biggest part of some of those positions, right? And how do you actually develop relationships with your subordinates and other employees, other coaches or other managers, right? And can you, do that fully with some sort of AI tech? I'm not sure, right? If it just comes down to making decisions, AI can tell you that. But in the end of the day, we're talking about, I don't know if you've ever, heard of the phrase, the people make the place. Like,
Right.
you have a business or an organization, it is run for and made for people, run by and made for people, rather, right? Long-winded answer, but I think it has a place to help. Could it ever fully replace? Maybe not. But hey, I never thought we'd be where we're at with AI right now. So who
Right.
knows?
And especially sport is such a human-based industry, right? There's such a like an importance placed on the human. Like people wouldn't want to watch robots play
No.
sports the same way you want to watch humans. You want to see like the failures and the like as much as like it hurts in the moment. Like you don't want to watch perfection. That's not what sports are about.
And I agree with you completely, right? Like and that's one thing I love about sports, right? Is
Right.
like we're all striving to, be better the next day, so to speak, is a phrase that coaches use, right? Or, win that title or make a PR goal or whatever. But that doesn't come linearly, right? That doesn't come just we're there. There's up and downs and some great days, some bad days. And it's part of that journey, so to speak, right? Like that's the part of sport, which is awesome. From like a player perspective, like you played sports, I played sports, like some days are great in practice, some are awful. Some games are great, some are awful. But that's what makes sports sport, right? And that's
Right.
it's not trying to always, we're not always trying to just optimize and, to your point, have everything perfect all the time, because that takes away from the actual thing of sport, so to speak. So I agree with you completely.
Yeah. All right. I think that's going to wrap it up for today. But thank you so much, Dr. Webster, for coming on. Thank you to everyone for listening. And I hope everyone has a great day.